At home, she's a terrible wife. She takes advantage of being a housewife and doesn't do anything. After marriage, the husband who rarely came home said this at a family gathering. The relatives sympathized with him and said, "What a terrible wife." Then the husband went on to say, "She's bad at cooking and the food is inedible. She's bad at housework in general and the house is dirty. I don't even want to go home." I had reached my limit at this point. He had treated people so poorly, yet he had the nerve to say something like that. I was angry and said to my husband, "What are you talking about? You don't even have a house." My husband and relatives were surprised that I had spoken up. "We canceled our lease on our house a week ago. Your things are in storage. You don't even come home, so it's no wonder you didn't know." "What? Cancelled?" My father-in-law told my bewildered husband. "What's going on?" After this, my husband would experience hell. My name is Emily. I'm 32 years old and married. My parents run a medium-sized factory. My father is the president, and my mother is in charge of organizing part-time workers at the factory. I'm an only child who was raised by my doting parents. I graduated from college and worked as an accountant for a major automaker. I'm shy and had little experience with romance when I turned 30. My parents were worried about me and introduced me to several potential partners through arranged dates, but I didn't find anyone who clicked with me. Just as I was thinking of giving up on arranged dates altogether, my father introduced me to someone he wanted me to meet. He was the son of an important business partner of my father's company. I couldn't ruin my father's reputation, so I reluctantly agreed to meet him. That's where I met Ken, who would later become my husband. Ken worked for another related company to inherit his father's company. He had a kind smile and was polite, which made me like him. It turned out that he felt the same way about me, and we exchanged contact information after our arranged date. We went on dates after that and got engaged 6 months later when Ken proposed to me. I happily accepted his proposal and went to both families to report our engagement. My parents were overjoyed by my marriage. "Emily, I'm glad. Ken, please make my daughter happy. With your father's company, we can work together for a long time." My parents seemed happy not only that I would be happy but also that we had a special bond with an important business partner. Thanks to Ken's company's dealings, my father's company seems to be doing well. Next, we went to visit Ken's parents. Their house was a mansion beyond my imagination. Smiling, my mother-in-law said, "I'm glad Ken and Emily are doing well. This child didn't get married until this age, so I was a little worried." My mother-in-law is apparently a city councilor. She seems kind, but her way of speaking is clear and she seems like a person with vitality. Then my father-in-law chimed in. "Yes, our family is a family business, so we value our bonds with our family and relatives. Emily will be one of them. I'll count on you for Ken from now on." My father-in-law was a person who seemed like a president with his dignity. I was nervous because of his rough demeanor. However, he agreed to our marriage and was happy about it. After that, Ken and I registered our marriage and had a wedding ceremony. The condition for getting married was to become a housewife. "My job is pretty busy, so I want Emily to take care of the house." I nodded at his words. "Okay, I'll do my best to serve you." Ken's salary was pretty good, and we received a large amount of wedding gifts from both families, so I wasn't particularly dissatisfied with being a housewife. My friends teased me that it was enviable to be a housewife with such good fortune. Ken and I started living together, but Ken refused his parents' offer to buy them a condominium. He said he wanted to live in a rental that was affordable for both of them. I thought it might not be good to rely on his parents for everything, so I agreed with Ken's idea. When they were deciding on a place to live, Ken said, "I'm too busy to go around looking for a real estate agent. Find a place you like and sign the contract. Is that okay?" "Yeah, I'll move in there." So I went around the real estate agents by myself and decided on a new rental apartment to live in with Ken after the wedding. We moved there after the wedding ceremony. We expected to start our sweet newlywed life, but it was soon shattered. Ken didn't come home at all. He came home when it was already past midnight due to overtime work on weekdays and left early in the morning. He also worked on weekends and holidays and said he had to work overtime. He also went on business trips frequently and sometimes stayed overnight. I stayed at home all day doing housework during that time, but I had a lot of free time. At first, I made food for Ken, but he said he had eaten outside and went to bed without touching it every day. So he continued to sleep at home without doing anything else. I gradually began to feel empty about such days. Is this what marriage is like? I did decide to support Ken, but this isn't good. After thinking that way, 3 months after the wedding, I decided to talk to Ken. Hey, Ken, are you really that busy with work? We don't have any time as a couple. Then Ken answered with a tired expression while loosening his tie. Yeah, I'm busy with work. Can't you see that I'm tired? I understand that. Then don't say anything unnecessary. I'm working hard to earn our living expenses. When he said that, I couldn't say anything. Certainly, Ken gave me more than enough living expenses every month. Since he was supporting me, I couldn't complain about his work. At that time, Thanksgiving Day was approaching. So I asked Ken, don't we have any gatherings or anything during Thanksgiving Day? Don't we have to visit your parents' house? Then Ken replied, no, it's okay. Besides, I have work too, and my father goes on a trip every year. But are you sure it's okay? I'm saying it's okay. We also sent them gifts for the summer greeting season, so it's fine. Ken said that in an annoying tone and went straight to the bedroom. At that time too, I could only stare at his back without saying anything. Time passed, and around the time Thanksgiving was over, I received a phone call. Hello, is this Emily? It was my father-in-law. Yes, father-in-law. It's been a while. I can't believe you didn't show up at the family gathering for Thanksgiving. What? I told you that we value our bonds with family and relatives. You're married now, so you should show up and help out. I was criticized without any explanation, and my mind went blank. I didn't even know there was a gathering for Thanksgiving, and Ken had told his parents that they were going on a trip. I'm sorry, father-in-law, but I don't want to hear your excuses. I asked Ken, and he said you're not even doing housework properly. What? I was at home all day and did housework perfectly. Did Ken really tell his father that? You became a housewife, so you should take care of the house properly. Got it? My father-in-law said that in an overbearing manner, and I could only answer yes. That night, I told Ken exactly what my father-in-law had said to me. You said there wasn't a gathering for Thanksgiving. So why? Did I say that? Maybe you misheard me. That's not true. If I knew there was a gathering, I would have gone. And if you have any complaints about my housework, you should tell me before telling your father. I pleaded with him in tears, but Ken just laughed. You're just lazing around at home all day. What are you talking about? I'm trying my best to do housework perfectly while you're not here. I don't know. You're probably just playing around with my money. That's not true. Ken looked at me coldly and left immediately. After that, Ken's attitude became even colder. He stopped coming home altogether. When I contacted him, he only said he was working. It was strange that he didn't come home at all. Something was definitely wrong. Ken must be hiding something from me. So I decided to investigate Ken by using my savings from when I was single to hire a private investigator. The seasons passed, and before I knew it, New Year's Day was approaching. While I was doing housework, my father-in-law called again. Emily, there's a family gathering for New Year's Day, so make sure you show up. Yes, I understand. I immediately contacted Ken. Hey, father-in-law told me to show up for New Year's Day. Huh? You don't have to come. What? But I can't expose an incompetent wife like you to my relatives. I'll go alone, so don't come. The phone call ended abruptly. A few days later, I was in front of my in-laws' house. I could hear the sound of a lively party from inside. When I pressed the intercom, my surprised mother-in-law greeted me. "Emily, I heard you weren't coming." I bowed my head and showed up at the party. Then I heard these words from my relatives. "Finally, the bride shows up. Is that the wife who doesn't do any housework? It's been a while since we've seen her." My father-in-law looked sullen and glared at me. Ken, who was drinking with his relatives, was stunned when he saw me. He probably didn't expect me to show up here. However, he couldn't kick me out in front of his relatives. So he turned away from me and started drinking again. While my mother-in-law and I were preparing food and drinks in the kitchen, I overheard a conversation in the living room. "Ken, is your married life going well?" "As you can see, uncle. As we can see. She's a terrible wife who takes advantage of being a housewife and doesn't do anything." I could hear Ken's arrogant voice. The relatives sympathized with him and said, "What a terrible wife." Then Ken went on to say, "She's bad at cooking and the food is inedible. She's bad at housework in general, and the house is dirty. I don't even want to go home." I had reached my limit at this point. He had treated people so poorly, yet he had the nerve to say something like that. I moved to the living room and said to Ken, "What are you talking about? You don't even have a house." I intervened in the conversation, and my husband and relatives looked surprised. "What? I don't even have a house." When Ken told me that in a panic, I calmly replied, "I canceled our lease on our house a week ago. Your things are in storage. You don't even come home, so it's no wonder you didn't know." Yes, I had canceled our lease on our house and started living alone. "What? Canceled?" Ken's eyes widened as his father told him. "What does that mean?" Ken still couldn't believe what was happening and couldn't say anything. So I turned to my father-in-law. "Ken has hardly come home since we got married. He hasn't even eaten my cooking once. He hasn't set foot in our home for months." Then my father-in-law raised his eyebrows. "What? Then where has Ken been sleeping? He seems to be living with his mistress. Right, Ken?" "What?" The relatives were murmuring. Ken blushed and said, "You're making things up. I just slept at the office. You're neglecting me because I'm busy, you worthless wife." Then my father-in-law said something like this. "Ken also said that, Emily. What are you thinking? Canceling the lease on the house without permission and making up lies about cheating." The relatives also said, "What a terrible wife. Poor Ken." Then I took an envelope out of my bag and dumped its contents on the spot. Inside were numerous photos of evidence of Ken's infidelity. Ken was smiling as he linked arms with a flashy woman and entered shady places and the woman's house. My father-in-law was staring at them intently. I told my husband firmly, "The evidence is there. Why don't you explain it to everyone yourself?" As Ken looked at the photos, his face turned pale. "That's not true." Then my mother-in-law, who had somehow appeared next to me, told him in a low voice, "Ken, tell us the truth." Ken seemed to give up and began to speak reluctantly. "I've been involved with her since before we got married. She's a woman I met at a nightclub. We love each other." The relatives were murmuring. Then I said, "That's why you didn't come home, because you were going to her house. So why did you marry me?" Father and mother would never approve of me marrying a woman from a nightclub. I thought I could reassure them by marrying a subcontractor's daughter. Despite my anger, I asked him another question. "Why did you badmouth me to your relatives and father-in-law?" "I thought it would make it easier to get divorced. I really wanted to be with her. I wanted to dump you from the beginning. But people wouldn't understand if there wasn't a reason." I was about to open my mouth in anger when there was a loud noise. My mother-in-law had slapped Ken in the face. "Mother, you're saying nothing but selfish things. What do you think marriage, Emily, is?" Then my father-in-law stood up and told him, "Ken, you're a shameful son. We're disowning you. What? Disowning? But I'm going to inherit your company, aren't I? We're not going to let that happen. Don't ever show your face in front of us again. Apologize to Emily too. Then Ken knelt down in front of me. Emily, I'm sorry. Please tell father and mother that you forgive me. I shouted at him loudly. I won't forgive you. We're getting divorced. We'll take plenty of compensation for damages. And good luck with your mistress, you scumbag. After that, Ken was kicked out by his father and relatives and left crying. On the other hand, I apologized many times to my in-laws and relatives. I got their promise that they would continue doing business with my family. Later, Ken and I divorced and I was able to win a large amount of compensation for damages. My in-laws gave me several $10,000 as compensation for causing trouble, so I decided to accept it. As for Ken, he was literally disowned by his parents and lost his future position as president. Moreover, he was hired by his father-in-law through connections. He lied so he could spend time with his mistress even though he couldn't do his job well. He was repeatedly late or absent from work, so he was fired. Ken lost both his future and income at once. He was even dumped by his mistress. Now he lives alone in a shabby apartment and is desperately looking for work. Even after hearing that, I have no sympathy for him. Rather, I feel like he got what he deserved. As for me, I returned to work while living alone. Thanks to various compensation for damages, I won't have any trouble living for a while. Next time, I plan to go overseas for a change of pace. From now on, I want to live brightly while valuing myself.